These notes will accompany the executive branch foldable. If you notice the titles at the top of each screen in this PowerPoint, it will go in that section of the foldable. If you've not yet received your foldable, please see Mrs. Dove to get it. It is already made except for the notes. So the structure section, the structure of the executive branch is made up of the president, the vice president, his cabinet, the regulatory agencies, and federal agencies. And we will talk about each one of these in depth in a later set of notes. The president's powers, again, this is a new section. He executes the laws, which means he enforces them. He carries them out. He prepares the annual budget, and we talked about annual as every year, and a budget is a plan to spend money. He prepares it, and Congress approves it. He appoints cabinet members, ambassadors, and federal judges. Any one of his appointments does have to be approved by Congress. He administers the federal bureaucracy, which is just a big fancy way of saying he's in charge of the executive branch. He proposes legislation. If you remember in our discussions, legislation is another word for laws. So he proposes ideas for new laws. He can call a special session of Congress. What that means is that he can actually call Congress to session because Congress does not meet 365 days a year. And there have been times in history, and there may be times in the future, where Congress is not in session, but the president would need them to be in session. A good example of this is when Pearl Harbor was attacked and Congress was called into special session. He can also veto legislation, which means he doesn't approve the law. The next section is the hats section. For this section, we're just going to list the hats. So we will not discuss what each one is. That will be in a later set of notes. He plays the role of Chief of State, which is a living symbol of the U.S. He is Chief Executive, which means he's in charge of the executive branch. He is Chief Legislator, which means he works with the legislative branch. He's Commander-in-Chief, or he's in charge of the military. He is Chief Diplomat, which he works with other countries for business. He is Chief of his party, so in other words, he's the leader of his political party. And he is Chief Citizen, which just means that he's like a role model or a representative for all citizens. The last section is how the president influences policymaking. Again, we are only listing these here. We will go into more depth in another set of notes. He proposes legislation in his State of the Union address. He appeals directly to the people. He can approve or veto legislation. And he also appoints officials who help carry out the laws.